People always assume they know who you are by the way you stand next to someone else. Especially when that someone is your father. I learned that lesson the hard way, on a quiet afternoon at a federal checkpoint, when one sentence he said out loud rewrote everything between us. But before I tell you what happened at that gate, let me ask you something. Have you ever been underestimated by the one person whose approval mattered most to you? The person you supported, defended, and quietly put ahead of yourself for years. If that sounds familiar, you'll understand why this story still sits heavy in my chest. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 33 years old, and I grew up on military bases. Not the glamorous version people imagine, but the quiet kind. Early mornings. Perfectly made beds. Shoes lined up at the door. My father, Thomas Carter, served 22 years in the Air Force as a senior master sergeant. E8. If you know anything about enlisted ranks, you know that isn't handed to you. It's earned slowly, painfully, through years of showing up when others burn out. My father wore his stripes like armor. Pressed uniform. Polished boots. Discipline in everything he did. When I was a kid, I memorized his ribbons before I memorized multiplication tables. I knew what each one meant because he explained them to me with pride. I loved the Air Force because I loved him. So when I told him I wanted to commission, he supported me. Fully. He helped me fill out applications. Drove me to medical exams. Sat in the bleachers when I raised my right hand and swore the oath for the first time. After the ceremony, he hugged me and laughed. Well, he said, now you outrank me. We both laughed. But there was something under that joke. Something neither of us named. I commissioned at 23 as a second lieutenant. Young. Nervous. Trying not to show how overwhelmed I felt. I called my dad constantly in those first months. I wanted his advice. He'd spent decades in the system. He knew how things really worked. But every time I asked him about navigating leadership or assignments, he'd pull back. You're an officer now, he'd say. You've got your own lane. At first, I thought he was encouraging independence. Then it kept happening. When I made first lieutenant, I called him. He congratulated me, then changed the subject. When I pinned on captain at 28, I told him. That's great, honey, he said. Your mom would be proud. My mom passed before I joined. Bringing her up felt like a way to acknowledge something without actually engaging with it. By the time I was selected for major at 33, I'd learned not to expect questions. Not about my duties. Not about where I was stationed. Not about what I actually did. And what I did wasn't small. I deployed. I worked long hours. I managed logistics for senior leadership. I held clearances most people never hear about. I coordinated operations I couldn't discuss, but I carried responsibility that kept me up at night. Still, every time my father introduced me, it was the same line. This is my daughter. She works on base. Nothing fancy. Nothing fancy. Once, during Thanksgiving, an aunt asked what I'd been working on. Before I could answer, my dad jumped in. She pushes paperwork, he joked. Keeps the coffee warm for the real officers. Everyone laughed. I smiled. I didn't correct him. The truth was, I just rotated back from an undisclosed location after 6 months supporting high-level operations. But I stayed quiet. Another time, at a diner near base, the cashier asked if I was military. I was in uniform. Blues. Gold oak leaves clear on my shoulders. Before I could answer, my dad waved her off. She's just a civilian today. I paid full price and stared out the window the entire drive home. I started noticing the pattern. He never asked what I did. Not really. When I said my work was classified, he stopped asking altogether. When I tried to share the unclassified parts, the leadership challenges, the pressure, the responsibility, he deflected. You'll figure it out. Sounds important. Good for you. It wasn't anger. It was absence. A quiet refusal to see who I'd become. Then he asked me for a favor. There was a retirement ceremony on a restricted base. An old friend of his. Can you get me on? He asked. I still have my credentials. They'll wave us through. I didn't correct him. I didn't explain how access actually worked anymore. I just said I'd meet him at the gate at 1400. The day came. We arrived separately. I was already waiting when he pulled up, relaxed and confident. We walked toward the checkpoint together. Armed guards. Clear signage. Strict protocol. A young staff sergeant stepped forward. IDs, please. My father handed over his retired ID with a polite smile. She's with me, he said, gesturing toward me. Just a civilian. I said nothing. I handed the guard my own identification. The one issued for my assignment. He glanced at it, then ran it through the scanner. For a moment, everything was normal. Then the scanner beeped. The screen flashed red. Bold text. Yankee white. Priority 1. The guard straightened instantly. His hand went to the red phone. The reinforced barrier began to open. The VIP lane. My father turned toward me, confused. What's going on? The guard handed my card back with both hands. Major, ma'am, he said. Your clearance is active. I'll escort you personally. And in that moment, standing at a gate my father thought he controlled, the version of me he'd held onto for years stopped fitting reality. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because what happened after that gate didn't just change how he saw my career. It changed how we saw each other. If you've ever been underestimated by someone you love, stay with me. Because the hardest part wasn't the clearance. It was what came after. We drove through the gate in silence. Not the comfortable kind. The heavy kind. The kind that presses against your chest and makes every sound feel too loud. The reinforced barrier slid shut behind us, and just like that, we were inside. Inside a space my father thought he understood. Inside a reality he hadn't prepared for. The escort vehicle followed close behind, lights off, professional, precise. I kept my eyes forward. My father stared out the windshield like the landscape might explain what just happened. After a few minutes, he finally spoke. Why didn't you tell me? His voice wasn't angry. It wasn't accusing. It sounded lost. I slowed the car slightly, keeping my tone even. You never asked. That landed harder than I expected. He didn't respond right away. We parked near the venue, stepped out, and the escort peeled away. The air felt different here. Controlled. Quiet. Purposeful. My father stood still, holding his retired ID in his hand like it no longer belonged to him. I don't understand, he said. I nodded. I know. He looked at me. Really looked at me. You said you worked on base. I do. You said it was administrative. I said I coordinated logistics for senior command staff. He frowned. That's not the same thing. No, I said calmly. It isn't. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration creeping in. You couldn't talk about it. Some of it, I said. Not all of it. But you stopped asking either way. We started walking toward the ceremony building. He kept pace beside me, slower now. I didn't want to pry, he said. It's not prying to show interest, I replied. He exhaled. I didn't know how. I stopped walking and turned to face him. Dad, I've been in the Air Force for 12 years. I've held 4 ranks. I've deployed. I've briefed colonels and generals. And you've never once asked me what I actually do. The words weren't sharp. They were tired. He swallowed hard. I thought, he began, then stopped. You thought what? He looked down at the pavement. I thought you were still figuring things out. I felt something settle in my chest. Not anger. Clarity. I'm 33, I said. I'm a major. I carry responsibility that affects people you trained and people you never met. I didn't stumble into this. He flinched. I never said you did. You didn't have to, I replied. We reached the entrance. People in dress uniforms moved past us. My father stood awkwardly at my side, suddenly unsure where he fit. Inside, the ceremony was formal. Flags. Speeches. Familiar rituals. We took seats near the back. He sat stiff, hands folded. Halfway through, a lieutenant colonel approached us. Calm. Confident. Major Carter, she said, nodding to me. Sir, I replied. She glanced at my father. Is this your father? Yes, ma'am. Thomas Carter. Retired Senior Master Sergeant. She smiled warmly and shook his hand. An honor. Thank you for your service. Then she turned back to me. Colonel Hayes asked for you on the next briefing rotation. He was impressed with your last assessment. Thank you, ma'am, I said. I'll be ready. She nodded and moved on. My father stared after her. She's your supervisor? Yes. And that colonel? I brief him. He leaned back slowly, like the room had shifted. After the ceremony, we walked toward the parking lot. He was quiet until we reached the car. Then he stopped. I was proud of my career, he said quietly. You should be. 22 years, he continued. Every stripe earned. Every promotion fought for. I know. He looked at me. And then you commissioned. And suddenly, you outranked me. I let that breathe. It wasn't sudden, I said. It was 4 years of college, training, and a commission I earned. He nodded, but his jaw was tight. You know what I mean. I do, I said softly. And I respect your path. But my career isn't a judgment on yours. He looked away. I didn't know how to be proud of you without feeling like I was being left behind. There it was. The truth beneath years of distance. That's not my burden to carry, I said gently. I can't shrink myself to protect your pride. He closed his eyes. I know. We stood there for a long moment. The flight line hummed in the distance. Finally, he said, I'm sorry. It wasn't everything. Not yet. But it mattered. Thank you, I replied. Next time, I added, meeting his eyes, use my rank. He nodded once. I will. The drive home was quieter, but different. Less heavy. When he got out of the car, he paused. "Can we start over?" he asked. I considered it. "We can start from here," I said. He nodded. "Okay." A week passed. Then another. I threw myself into work. Long hours. Tight deadlines. One afternoon, my supervisor stopped by. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Family stuff," I said. She nodded knowingly. "My father was enlisted too," she said. It took time. That helped more than she knew. Then my phone rang one evening. "Hey, Em," my dad said. "I've been thinking." "About?" "About how little I know about your job." I smiled despite myself. "You can ask." He cleared his throat. "What does a major with that kind of clearance actually do?" I leaned back in my seat. "I coordinate executive-level operations. I manage logistics for high-level briefings. I make sure the right people are in the right place with the right information at the right time." There was a pause. "That sounds heavy," he said. "It is." "And you're good at it?" "Yes," I said. "I am." Another pause. "Then, I'm proud of you." This time, I believed him. A month later, he asked to visit my base. Not for a ceremony. Just to see where I worked. I arranged the clearance. When he walked into my office and saw my nameplate, my awards, the way people addressed me, something shifted. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. As we walked back to the parking lot that day, he said, "I see you now." I nodded. That's all I wanted. But the story doesn't end there. Because seeing someone once is easy. Respecting them consistently is harder. And what happened next proved whether he really meant it. Respect doesn't announce itself all at once. Sometimes it arrives quietly, through consistency, through effort, through someone choosing to do better after they realize they've been wrong. My father didn't change overnight. But after that gate, after that moment when the world saw me before he did, something in him finally shifted. A few weeks after his visit to my office, he started calling more. Not to talk about the weather or his garden. To ask questions. Real ones. "What kind of pressure are you under this week? Do you still enjoy the work? Who do you answer to now?" I answered what I could. I didn't overshare. I didn't perform. I just spoke honestly. And for the first time in years, he listened. Then came my reassignment. Another high clearance unit. Another base. He asked if he could help me move. I said yes. When we pulled up to the gate together, a young airman stepped forward. "IDs, please." I handed mine over. My father handed his retired card. The scanner beeped. "Clearance confirmed." "Welcome, Major," the airman said. My dad smiled. "She's the one you need to worry about," he joked. Not dismissive. Proud. It was a small moment, but it mattered. As we unloaded boxes, a colonel walked by, stopped, and greeted me by name. He shook my father's hand. "You raised a hell of an officer," he said. My dad straightened. "She did that on her own," he replied. And this time, I didn't correct him. Because now, it didn't feel like erasure. It felt like recognition. Months passed. Promotions came and went. Work intensified. Responsibility grew heavier. And my father stayed present. He asked about my assignments. He came to ceremonies. He used my rank every time. He didn't brag, but he didn't minimize either. And somewhere along the way, the tension that had lived between us for years began to dissolve. Not because we pretended it never existed, but because we finally acknowledged it. Years later, when I stood at my own retirement ceremony, everything came full circle. I was a colonel by then. 32 years of service behind me. My daughter, Elena, stood beside my father in the front row. She was a captain. Confident. Steady. Choosing her own path. I spoke about service. About leadership. About legacy. And when I thanked my father publicly, I watched him wipe his eyes. Not out of regret. Out of pride. After the ceremony, he pulled me aside. That day at the gate, he said quietly. I was ashamed. Not of you. Of myself. But it woke me up. I nodded. It did the same for me, I said. He looked at me. The last 20 years, watching you lead, watching you become who you are, that's been the greatest privilege of my life. I hugged him. Long and tight. Here's what I learned. Sometimes the people who love us the most struggle the hardest to see us clearly. Not because we failed to explain ourselves, but because accepting who we've become forces them to confront parts of themselves they'd rather avoid. Growth doesn't always look like applause. Sometimes it looks like distance. Sometimes it looks like silence. And sometimes, it looks like a gate opening that someone never expected to open for you. I didn't earn my worth at that checkpoint. I already had it. The scanner didn't give me authority. It revealed it. And I stopped shrinking the moment I let the world reflect back what I'd already built. That's when everything changed. Not because my father finally understood my career, but because I finally understood that I didn't need his permission to stand fully in it. So if you're watching this and you've ever felt dismissed by someone you would have done anything for, hear this. You don't owe anyone a smaller version of yourself. You don't need to hide your growth to protect someone else's pride. The right people will catch up. And if they don't, that doesn't erase what you've earned. If this story resonated with you, tell me in the comments. Where are you watching from? And have you ever had to stand your ground after someone crossed a line? If you did, what happened next? Hit like if you believe in boundaries, respect, and owning your place. Subscribe for more real stories about growth, identity, and quiet strength. And I'll see you in the next one.